Alright, so we're on to the fourth world. Let's dig in. The numbers inside brackets give additional information that adjacent hexes are connected. So, just like we had before with the columns, where those were connected, same thing works for the ones that are inside black numbers, for them being adjacent around here. Again, there's a little bit of a difference, because this 4 here, these two are not connected because of this gap. So, kind of like how we had before, where we had 5 hexes in a row, or sorry, in a column, and we had a 4 with a curly brace, we got to mark the inner 3. The same thing works when we wrap it around this 4 here. So we know that these 3 are blue, because it's either these 4 here, or these 4 here. But in either case, these 3 are blue. Okay. This one is already adjacent, and then that tells us that this one is blue. Okay. With this 3, last level of the third world, we had 5 in a row, 5 in a column with 3 in curly braces, and we got to mark the very middle one blue. Same deal here. These 3 are blue, or these 3 are blue, or these 3 are blue. In any of those 3 cases, this one is blue. Okay. This 4 here means that these 4 are blue. And then we know that this one needs to be blue because it's these 3. Alright. So I'm going to start going through the levels a little more quickly here. And I'll point out if there's something interesting. So here, we have the same situation we've come across a few times, where it's either these 2 or these 2. So we know that this one is blue. But we get to take away one extra piece of information. And that's this one can't be blue, because it's not adjacent to another one for this 2 in a curly brace. So we get to mark this one as black for free. And ignore that this says 0 here, because I want to show something else that's important. So for this 3 in a curly brace, we got to mark this middle one as blue for free. This middle one of the 5. Now again, ignore that this is a 0. We get to mark this one as blue, because the possibility of these 3 being blue is now gone since this one is black. So now there's only, instead of being 3 options, there are only 2. It's either these 3 or these 3. And in either of those 2 cases, this one is also blue. So we get to mark this one as blue for free. Now, coming back to the world that we're actually in, this is a 0. We get to mark this, and this one needs to be blue. Okay. These 2 and this one are blue. This is the only one that can be blue to make 4 connected, and then these 2 are not. Just like we had with this 0 over here, this one got marked as black, so this 3 means that we get to mark this one. Additionally, this one is already adjacent. This is the 3rd here. That one. Okay. This one is already adjacent. This is the 2nd for here. This 4 means we get to mark this one. This 3 means we get to mark this one. These 2 means that this one has to be, and these 2 can't. We have these 4 for this one, for this 4 in curly braces. And so we have these 2 here. So the only thing we have left is this group of 4. Now, I can tell a couple different things. First off, it's either these 3 or these 3. Okay, so I know it can't be this one. But in addition, and this is kind of a next level of thinking, and it took me quite a while to kind of catch on to in more difficult levels. If we look over here, we only have one remaining, and we know it's one of these three. Sorry, we know it's these three, so this one would need to be blue, or we know it's these three, and this one would need to be blue. And one of those two has to be the cases, so one of these two has to be blue. We already know that this one can't be blue, but that also tells us, since we only have one remaining blue one, that this one also can't be blue. So we know that neither of these can be. And I can tell you before I even click them, that the numbers that are under here is going to tell us which of these two is blue. They're both zeros. That gets rid of that one and causes that one to be blue. So there you go. Okay, so we have a 0, we have another 0, another 0. We have a 2 in curly braces. We have a 1 here. This one is adjacent. So here's the second 2. This one is adjacent. Here's a 3 in curly braces. We already have the 1 here. This one forces this to be. This 2 is adjacent. This 1 is adjacent. This one is adjacent. This 2 forces both of these. This one is adjacent. And this 2 forces this one. This one is adjacent. This 2 is anchored by this blue, so forces this one. This one can't be. This 3 is anchored by this one and forces these two. So now this 3 is adjacent. This 1 forces here. This 2 is adjacent. This 1 is adjacent. We have a 0, another 0, another 0. This 1 forces this one. That's also in line with this 3 curly brackets. This 3 curly brackets forces this one to be blue. This one is adjacent. This one forces this hex to be blue. This 3 forces this hex to be blue. This 2 is adjacent. This 2 in curly braces forces this one and then is adjacent. This 3 is adjacent. This 2 forces this hex. This 3 is adjacent. This 1 is adjacent. This 1 is adjacent. This 2 forces this hex. This 3 is adjacent. And this 3 forces this hex. This 2 is adjacent. This 1 is adjacent. This one is also adjacent. And we have one remaining, and one hex all the way over here by itself. Alright, from this 3 we have here. So I don't think we've run into this situation yet. This 2 has curly braces, so it's either these two or these two. Maybe we did run into this, maybe I'm just forgetting. So that forces this one. Yeah, we had this in either the last level or the level before that. This one can't be blue then. This one forces this, which means that this 2 is now adjacent. This 2 is in curly braces, so it forces here, and then is adjacent. This 1 is adjacent. We have a 0. We have some more zeros. Lots of zeros. We have a 3 here. The fact it's in curly braces doesn't matter. We have a 3 in curly braces, so it's either these 3 or these 3. So this one can't be. We have a 0, so it needs to be this one for this 3, and then this 3 requires this hex to be blue. From this 3 we have here, This 3 allows us to know that it's either these. This 2 in curly braces means that this one can't be. This 2 means that this one is. That means that neither of these two are for this here. Then we have a 0. This 3 in curly braces forces this hex to be blue. Because of this 3, this one is not. We have a 0. This 1 is adjacent. That forces this 2 here. And this 3 here. We have a 3 here. And a 3 here. So it can't be this one because of this 3. We have a 0. Another 0. And now we have a force here on this 3. Then this one, this hex can't be blue. We have another 0. And then a force here from this 3. Okay. So now we're in a position that looks a little tricky. And there's a few different ways you can look at it, and I'm going to demonstrate both different ways that you can think about looking at this. So, let's start with this 1. This 1 tells us that either this hex is blue or this hex is blue. If this hex is blue, then because this is a curly braces 2, then this hex would also be blue. So these 2 would be blue, and since it's a 2, these 3 would be black. Okay? So these 2 would be blue, and these 3 would be black. Now, because this one is black, because this hex is black, this 1 would force this hex to be blue. The problem with that is that from the assumption that we went with of this one being blue, that would, the assumption that this hex would be blue forces this hex to be blue. Right? So now, because of this hex, this 1, it forces this hex to be blue. That would make all 3 of these hexes blue. The problem is that this hex is a 1 and would then be adjacent to 2. So that's the problem. So we know that it can't be this one that's blue. So we know that this hex is blue. If this hex is blue, that forces this hex to be blue and these hexes to be black. Because this hex is black, it forces this hex to be blue because of this 1. And that actually turns out to be the correct answer. But we can look at it in terms of this 1, and then looking at the different paths that would happen if this hex were blue, or if this hex were blue. This hex being blue makes an impossible situation due to this 1. And this hex being blue causes everything to work out correctly. So that's one way you can look at this situation as the board stands right now, is based off of this 1. The other way that you can look at this situation is based off of these 2 ones. Okay? So, there's again going to be a few different branching paths that we look at from these 2 ones. So let's start with this one. Because of this 1, one of these 2 is blue. Okay? One of these 2 is blue. Let's assume that we say that this one is blue. Okay? That would mean that this hex is black, which because of this 1 and this hex being black, that would force this hex to also be blue for this 1. So both of these are blue. This is black. Okay? Now, because this is a 2, and both of these 2 are blue, that would force these 3 to be black. And that causes a problem because now this 1 is not adjacent to a blue hex because all 3 of these are black. So that causes a problem. So instead, we need to look at this one having this hex be blue. When this hex is blue, this hex is black. When this hex is blue, this hex is black because of this one. So both of these are black, this is blue. Because these 2 are black, that forces these 2 to be blue because they're the only 2 that are consecutive. And then this one would be black, and everything works out. So what we looked at is figuring out the split paths, either starting from this 1 or starting from these 2 ones, and where we go from there. So you can look at it from either side. But you arrive at the same destination. Alright, this 2 forces these, this 2 forces that. This 3, this is an interesting point. So, just like with the columns, they can't all be connected. So for this 3 here, we already have 2 that are connected. So this one cannot be, because then all 3 of the ones that are adjacent to this 3, all 3 of them would be connected. So this one can't be. And then that forces this hex to be blue. Same thing over here, these 2 are, so this one can't be, and then forces this one to be. With this 2, we know that it can't be this one because then these 2 would be connected. And for this 3, we know that it can't be these 3 because they're connected. So this one needs to be. And then 2 of these 3 are, but we don't know which 2 yet. We do know, however, that it can't be both of these. It can be one of them, and as it turns out, it will need to be one of them. It can be one of these 2, but it cannot be both because of this 2. Because of the dashes, they would be connected. So it can't be both of these 2. Similarly, because of this 2 with the dashes, it can't be both of these 2. It can be one of them, but it can't be both. So it's one of these 2 and one of these 2. Since there are 3, it can't be just this one, because that would just be 2. So it needs to be this one and this one. Sorry, this hex and this hex. I'm going to try and use the term hex for referring to individuals, and 1 for like the value of a column or a diagonal or the inside of the hex. Because I don't want to use the same word for multiple things. I think that might get confusing. So I might need to catch myself, but you know, we're working on it. So this 3 is now adjacent, so this one can't be. This hex can't be. This 3 is adjacent, so this hex can't be. And this 3 forces this hex to be blue. This 2 is now adjacent. If you haven't picked up on it by now, also I'm going to be using, when I say that it's adjacent, I mean that it's adjacent to its number of hexes that are blue. So any other ones that are adjacent to it, we can mark as black. Just to clarify. This 3 forces both of these 2. This 5 forces all 5 of these. So the most that a single black hex can have on it is 6, and that would mean that all of the surrounding ones are blue. All of the surrounding hexes are blue. If we already have one hex that's black, then we know that all of the other hexes are blue. So we get to mark all 5 of those hexes for free. Because of the dashes on this 3, we know that this hex can't be blue, and then that this hex is forced to be blue. This hex is already adjacent, this hex is already adjacent, and this hex forces this, or this 2 forces this hex to be blue. This 2 forces both of these to be blue. This 2 is adjacent. This 3 forces these 3 hexes. This 3 is adjacent. And this 3 is adjacent. This 2, or this 2, forces this hex to be blue. Alright? That is the end of the 4th level. We're moving right on along. We're going to be moving on to World 5. Stick around and we'll be right there.